In this movie, I'm going to show you how you can get up and running with Sass. And in here, I'm going to show you how you can do it on the Mac. On the Windows machine, the steps are slightly different, and I'll try to point those out to you as I go along. The first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to make sure that Sass is installed. On the Mac, this is really easy to do because in order to run Sass, you have to have Ruby running. Sass uses something called a gem, which is an extension of Ruby, and that's why you need to make sure that Ruby is installed. And you do this installing the Sass gem through the command line. But before you can do that, you have to make sure that you have Ruby. So if you're on a Windows machine, you're going to want to go to rubyinstaller.org, and you're going to want to go to the download button. And once you're at the download button, you can select the version of Ruby that you want to install. And there's information here that's going to talk about the appropriate version. It depends if you're running a Windows machine that is using the 64-bit version or a version that does not. Sass does work on the newest version of Ruby, so you can go ahead and install the appropriate version of Ruby depending on your machine. Now for you Mac users, you guys don't need to do this because, as I mentioned, Ruby is already installed on the Mac. So all we need to do is install the Sass gem. So either way, if you're on Windows, make sure you install Ruby first and you'll go through the download and install it. If you're on the Mac, you don't need to do that. You're going to need to get into the command line application. So again, if you're running on a Mac, you can just use Terminal. If you're running on a Windows machine, you're going to have to go ahead and open your command program. And I'll provide some links to you guys to how you can do this on a Windows machine. Once we get up and running, the process is going to be the same. So once I have Ruby installed, or if I'm on a Mac, I'm just going to open up Terminal, and then to install Sass, I'm going to install that Sass gem. To install that, we're just going to type gem install Sass, and I'm going to go ahead and hit return. And sometimes if you're on a Mac, you're going to get an error message letting you know that you don't have permissions to write to the appropriate directory. We can easily work around this by simply typing sudo gem install Sass. And what this does is it's going to give you the admin rights. It kind of acts as a super user and gives you the rights you need to do this command. And you can see as soon as I click return here, it's going to ask for my administrative password, so you'll need to know what that is, and you're going to plug that in, and then it's going to go ahead and install Sass, and you should get a message saying that Sass has been successfully installed and that the gem has been installed. Now once again, for my Windows users out there, you guys probably aren't going to have to use the sudo command. If you install Ruby, you should just be able to use the gem install Sass. I would always advise you to just use gem install Sass first, and then only use the sudo command if you need to. If you ever want to verify that Sass has been installed and what version you're running, you can use Sass-V, and it will tell you the version of Sass that you're running. So here's the version, which is called Selective Steve. I can also check and see the version of Ruby that I'm running. So that would just be Ruby space -V, and it'll tell me the version of Ruby that I'm running on this particular machine. Now that the Sass gem is installed, now I'm ready to start using Sass, and I would use the command line to do that as well. So once you have the gem installed, now you're ready to use Sass. So I've already set up a directory on my hard drive, and I've saved an HTML file in it, and this is just the basic HTML file. So this is the only thing that's on my directory. So now I'm just going to cd into that directory. So for the sake of this demonstration, I've placed the folder that I'm working from on my desktop. You can put the folder wherever you want. You're just going to have to need to know where that location is so that you can cd into that location. So from here, I'm going to type cd space desktop / and I'm calling my folder Sass demo. And when I click that, it does say that I'm in the Sass demo. On terminal, I can use the PWD and make sure that I'm in the appropriate location, which I am. If I do an ls command, you can see that it does show my Sass example.html, which is currently the only item that I have in the folder. So now I'm ready to tell terminal to start watching this folder. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to create a Sass file so that it has something to watch. So I'm going to go back into my editor. In this case, I'm using brackets. I'm going to create a new document. So this is a new blank document. I'm going to save this document, and Sass knows that I should be saving it in my Sass demo location because that's the last place that I was working from, and I opened the folder from brackets. And for right now, we're not going to create any subfolders. I'm just going to go ahead and save this everything in my root folder. Later, I'll show you how we can use subdirectories, but for now, we're just going to keep this simple. I'm going to call my file styles.sass, and I'm going to click save. So now I have my styles.sass file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back into the command line. In this case, I'm using terminal, and I'm going to use the Sass -- watch command. And notice there is a space between Sass and -- watch. And then I need to have another space and tell the command line the file that I want to watch. So in this case, I want to watch styles.sass. Then I'm going to type a colon, and I'm going to type the name of the file that I want to compile my Sass code into. And that is a file that doesn't have to exist. It'll just make that file once it starts watching the file. So in this case, I'm going to use styles.css. That's going to be the name of the file that I'm going to want to create. I'm going to tell Sass that I want to watch the file, and then the arguments that I'm passing on are the file that I want it to watch, and then the file that I want the code compiled to. So in this case, we're watching styles.sass, and we're going to compile into styles.css. And as soon as I hit return, you can see that a couple things have happened. First of all, it lets me know that Sass is watching for changes. It also lets me know to stop watching, I would need to click Control-C to stop this behavior. And these things are going to be really similar on both platforms. So if you're using the PC, it's going to look really similar. I don't think the default command line will give you different colors, but the information should be the same. It also let me know that it actually wrote two new files, one called styles.css and one called styles.css.map. So these are the two files that Sass is going to generate, and we're going to need those to be able to create our project. And it's just listening for any sort of changes. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep this window open, and you'll see that as I make changes in my file, this will update. Let me just reorganize the layout of my windows here a little bit so we can see multiple things. So this is the browser right here, and I'll kind of place this right here so I can switch between these. And then I'm just going to make my brackets window a little bit smaller so we can keep an eye on the terminal window as we make these changes. Okay, great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to write some Sass. Okay, so we're going to start off by writing something really simple. We're just going to test and make sure that everything's working correctly. So I'm going to make a rule for the body, and you type your selector. You're going to type return, and if you saved the file as a Sass file, brackets should automatically create the indentation for you, but this is what you want. You don't use curly braces anymore, you just use the selector, and all of the property and values are just simply going to be indented. You don't need the semicolons at the end, you need the indentation. So when Sass sees something that is outdented, it's assuming that you're moving on to the next selector. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to set the background, and we'll just set the background color to yellow. And I'm going to save my file. And when I save my file, you can see that in terminal, it immediately said, hey, it detected a change, and it rewrote my style.css and the style.css.map file. If I go into the browser and I refresh the page, you're going to see that nothing happens. And actually, the reason that nothing's happening there is because It did write to my CSS file, but I neglected to pull in the CSS file into my directory. So here's the HTML that we're looking at. You can see there's no link to CSS. So let's just in the head add a link tag, and I'm just going to link to my file. So the file that I want to link to is going to be the CSS file. Remember that the HTML can't read the Sass file. The Sass file is being compiled to the CSS file. So if I save now and we look in the browser, you can see that the background color is yellow. That is pretty bright. Let's go ahead and change that to something a little more mellow. Let's make it orange-red instead. And I'll save. And of course, Terminal is going to detect that I made a change. And if I refresh my page, the color is going to change to something else. I guess I'm on a bright color run right here because all my colors are very bright. Anyways, this kind of gives you an idea for how you can write. And before I leave you on this lesson, I do want to point out that the spacing in Sass is really important. So normally with CSS, it doesn't matter if we have a space between the property and the value after the colon or not, but in Sass, that is going to be problematic. So if I make that change and I save my Sass file, you're going to see that down here, it lets me know that there's a change has been detected, and I also have a warning on line 2 of my Sass file. This selector doesn't have any properties and will not be rendered. And if I try to refresh my web page, you can see that the color no longer shows up. So what's happening is that it doesn't understand what this color is. As soon as I put that space back in and we save the page, now you can see that I get the change was detected and I don't have any of that warning sort of information. And if I refresh, now the background color is going to come back in. So this is just a really simple example to get you up and running using Sass, and this is how you would get it up and running on a Mac. I will include some documentation for what you'll need to do on a Windows machine. It is fairly similar, but obviously the most important thing is that you need to install Ruby prior to trying to install the Sass gem.